That's a live stream. Boy, it's hard to see my live stream. There it is. I should probably turn up my own volume here so I can hear it. Oh boy, it is a great day here. Hope everybody's doing well. It's our pre-show for today's Security Plus study group. And if you are ever wondering about, and I'm listening to myself in my microphone right now. There's you can't see it. Let me bring up my view of what I'm doing right now. This is the part of the pre-show where I check to make sure cameras are working, microphones are working, and I'm just not getting very much output out of my headset. This is why we always tell people when you call in, is it plugged in? It is not. There we go. I sound so different now. It's always something. I hope that's the worst of our technical problems today. We have a live show for you today on Security Plus. This is going to be great. We start at the top of the hour. You can see here that it is close to the top of the hour. Got about 10 minutes to go. Let's pop open the chat's already open. Hey, chat room. Hope everybody's doing well. Hello, Malk. Hey, we missed one, didn't we? I think it's going to miss us. Is it Melissa? Is that the name of it? It's now a hurricane, or will be a hurricane. So we're good. We are making it happen. So I'm glad it sort of missed both of us this time through. Pretty happy about that. Hope everybody's doing well. This is great to see everyone. Thanks for joining in today. I have all new questions, of course, for you in this first hour. And then I am taking your questions for the second hour. If you would like to put your virtual pin in our digital pin cushion, if I used enough odd terms, there they are. You can do that by heading to the link that is on your screen. This is also the link that we will be using for our Q&A. So once you're on that link, you can just stay there. The screen will automatically update so that you can see the questions as they show up. That is also the link you can use to submit questions for the second hour. Is this recorded? Well, I mean, this is not the recording. This is the live part, but this is recorded. And it will be available on YouTube immediately after we're done. When I hit the stop button, it processes for a couple of minutes, and then it's available for anybody watching the replay. And of course, we have an entire replay playlist on YouTube and a replay page on the Professor Messer website. And I am recording things too. You can't really see them. Let me get rid of my lower third here. See the circling Cylons down here? Those Cylons are my recording. Oh yeah, that's working great. Everything's working. Don't say too loud. Everything appears to be working. So we're going to go with that. We're going to make that happen. And hopefully it won't bother people too much. I did notice that it says new Chrome available in the upper right-hand corner. Now we're all going to stare at it for the rest of the time. But I don't want to update the browser because I'm doing a live stream. It's one of those situations. We need to go through change control. I need to process this as a change control request. We need to test the update to Chrome and then confirm that it works properly. Then we can roll it out. What's actually going to happen is I'm just going to push the button. Now, once we're done, I will push the button so that it updates. And that'll give me until the next live event to fix any problems. Probably not the best strategy, but that's sort of how we do things sometimes. When we're updating the website, it's very different. I have a completely separate test system. I load things onto the test system. I test on the test system. Then it's deployed over to production. So, but a Chrome update, I think we're okay. A Chrome update on my personal machine. People checking in from all over the place. You can see folks are checking in. Lots of folks in North America and Canada. Got some folks in Vancouver. It's like some folks out on the East Coast as well. And then way up north. Really? You guys are working it up there in Canada. I got some kinfolk up there, so it's nice to see folks checking in from Canada. There's all kinds of something happening here. We've got also folks checking in from the European Union and from South Africa and way out here in the islands of the Pacific. And there's Pembroke Pines. There's somebody on Pines Boulevard. There's somebody on Miramar Parkway checking in. Thanks for being here. Somebody on Flamingo is checking in. We've got a lot to go through today. I have all new questions, of course, and some of the questions I of course, redo and update the questions before every one of these. I usually write more questions than I'm going to use. I think that's just a good idea. So I have some that were left over from last week, and then I wrote new ones for this week, and it was really nice to go through that process again. I like having that the Q&A part of it. And as I'm writing it, I'm thinking, I wonder if they're going to get this one, if this is a gimme, if it's not. We try different things every time. And I don't think I've figured out the formula yet, but I'm trying. We're getting there. After 19 years, we're still tweaking the formula. We're still trying to figure it out, which is fine. Well, we have a lot to go through also with other things that are happening. Everything looks good. I'm checking all of my video inputs, and they look pretty good. Happy with that. Hope everybody's doing well out there in the chat. Thanks for being here, by the way. We appreciate you. Taj is going for the test on Friday. This is a lot of folks checking in, going to Friday. Somebody mentioned earlier you scheduled your exam on December 25th, which is an unusual time to schedule anything, really. But why not? You know, if they're got people on and they are taking it, it'll certainly be time off, I would imagine, for many people. So schedule's in right there with everything else, I guess. Hey, once you finish opening the presents, you finish your lunch, your dinner, why not take an exam? I used to have to work on holidays. I worked in a computing center for university when I was going through university. And of course, that's a 24/7. The computers are always running. You can't really turn off all the mainframes and go away for a holiday. So everything keeps running. So you have to staff it. So the people that get to staff it are the ones that are lowly, bottom of the totem pole kind of folks. And that was me. And so I have spent Christmases with the computers before. Oh boy, we've got a lot to go through. This is recorded. We got plenty to talk about. In fact, there's full replays of every study group that we've done, I don't know, ever, on the YouTube. You can always go to our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube, and you'll see playlists there, and you will be able to watch any of them, our A+, our Network Plus, and our Security Plus study groups, even study groups going back many years. We've got lots of study groups, so you can watch. I don't recommend going back too far. We keep our playlists for our study groups specific to the current version. So it does say SY0-701. What is a study group? I'm so glad you asked. I need you to watch for the next 2 hours, and you will know what a study group is. It's the thing that we do every month where I will ask you questions that come from the exam objectives, and we all get to answer them online and see how we do. It's sort of like a game show with no prizes. That's exactly. Your prize is knowledge. That's what it is. There's not no prize. It's you become a better person. You become a smarter person by going to the study group. That is your bonus. That is the piece of it to go. Yeah, this is not the study group part. This is the pre-show. We've got 1 minute and 15 seconds or so before we actually get started. This is me making sure everything's turned on. You will eventually have a much better view of what's happening than what I am doing right here. So we are good. We'll talk about Security Plus. We'll talk about all kinds of things when we go through this. There's plenty to step through. Lots going on here. Oh, by the way, you can, of course, always submit questions for the second hour at any time using the same link that is right there behind me at the bottom of your screen, professormesser.com/QA. That is where you answer questions. It's also where you can ask questions, and I will be taking your questions. You can ask anything you'd like and submit it using those tabs at the top of your page to be able to do that. 30 seconds to go. 30 seconds, Mr. Sinatra. We're going to get things started here in just a moment. So glad you are here. So glad we are doing this. We always have a good time. We're putting these together, and it's always nice to be able to be here live and talk to all of you. So thank you so much for carving out some time and just stopping by and saying hello, if nothing else. Okay, with that, we are at the top of the hour. I want to see it turn to 12, just because that's how I am. There we go. Top of the hour. which means I need to find my keynote. That's not my keynote. That's my radar. We need keynote. There's keynote. Let's get a green light. Green light, green, green. Green is good. And boop, there we go. That means it's time for a live stream, everybody. Let's see if we can make this happen. There goes that lower third. Here comes this thing. And let's start the live stream. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2025 Professor Messer SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. We get to see just how well you might know some of those topics. We have all new questions, of course, to go through today. Plenty to work through as we are going through and studying the latest exam objectives. We will be stepping through all of those in this live stream. If you are here live, we would love it if you joined us by opening a new tab in your browser and heading over to professormesser.com/QA. This is the link that will give you access to answer the questions as we go through this. Now, I realize, of course, that many of you are not watching this live. You're watching this on a replay. And if that's the case, this link won't be available for you. You should join us live. You can always find out when the next live event is going to be by looking at our events calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Now that you've gone to that link, you've popped open a new browser window, you're at professormesser.com/QA, I would like you to answer a question for me. And that question is one that we did last month. It's our only old question, a reused question that you will see today, just to see if you're able to get in and answer the question online. The question is, and as I go through this, keep in mind, of course, please do not answer the question in the chat room. Please do not put any hints into the chat room. That is our standing rule on our live stream. Instead, you want to go to the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. The question asks, a company would like to minimize the chance of data corruption if a database server was to unexpectedly lose power. Which of the following backup strategies would be the best choice? Would it be journaling, encryption, snapshots, offsite storage, or replication? It's got to be one of those, right? Now, if you think you know what the answer is, do not answer in the chat room. Use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. We're going to come back to this question in just a moment. So get your answers in, and we will have a look at what other things we can do today that will bring you up to date with Security Plus. Thank you so much for joining us. It'd be very difficult to do a live stream with interactivity if there was no one to interact with. So thank you so much for joining us live. And if you're watching on the replay, thank you as well. Of course, when we are not here doing a live stream, you can go to professormesser.com/YouTube, professormesser.com/Twitter or /X, professormesser.com/Instagram/Discord. You get the idea. If you want to find us on social media, just type in professormesser.com/ the social media site you would like to find us on, and that would be the one you can go with. One of the things that we are focused on today is the Security Plus exam, of course. The latest, the most recent, the one that is current, is a version number called the SY0-701. This was an exam that was released on November the 7th of 2023. And we estimate that it will probably retire somewhere around May of 2027. Now, we don't know exactly when that retirement date will be because it's not been announced by CompTIA yet, but generally they keep their exams active about 3.5 years, which means as we sit here today in October of 2025, you have plenty of time to study for your exam. The exam itself is a single exam. It's 90 minutes in length. You get a maximum of 90 questions. You could get fewer than 90 questions on this exam. The passing score you're hoping for is on a scale between 100 and 900, and you need to score 750. So there's quite a bit that we have to go through and we have to know to get up to that scoring level. So you really do have to know your stuff. The exam itself is primarily a multiple choice exam, but CompTIA also has performance-based questions on the exam, and we do have a performance-based question for you today. We'll have to see how well we do with our performance-based questions, so stick around for that one as well. We also want to remind you that we have a lot more than just our free course that's available on YouTube that you can watch without having to register. You don't have to pay for it. You just simply go to YouTube and everything is there for you. But of course, you might want some other study materials as well. And we have course notes, we have practice exams, we have downloadable versions and offline versions of the audio and video files. We have direct access to me and questions you can ask during this live stream. We have these live streams themselves and so much more. We have our Exam Hacks ebook. There's a lot more on our website. And if you'd like to see other study materials that might help you get over that hump and earn that Security Plus certification, you can have a look over at professormesser.com/701SB. There will be a replay posted of this live stream immediately afterwards. It's available on YouTube, and there will be links on the Professor Messer website over to that connection. Of course, we also create an audio-only podcast version of this live stream. You can find it under professormesser.com/podcast. So if you like to have audio that you can have in your car when you're working out, something that you can just listen to and learn wherever you happen to be, you might want to add this to your favorite podcast listening program. If you have a subscription with one of the streaming services like Spotify, for example, you don't have to download anything. You simply need to search for Professor Messer, and all of that audio is available on those platforms as well. If you have a look at our YouTube video description, you'll notice about a day after we're done here, there will be an extensive list of timestamps that will be there. Those timestamps are not something done automatically. In fact, it's very difficult to do these with any type of automated process. It turns out to be just a mess if you ever try. So one of the things that's important here is that we have someone go through our entire live stream and document everything that we've done. And that person is my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. She's going through and watching this probably at 2x speed. And she is really focusing on making sure that you're able to go back and find exactly what you want at exactly the right timestamp and be able to find that across all of our live streams. Thank you so much, Lori, for doing this. I know that everybody is able to take advantage of those. So thank you for putting in that effort. And hopefully those of you that are looking for information on these live streams, you can use those timestamps as well. When we're not here on the timestamp and looking through the timestamps and going through the YouTube video descriptions and going through the replays, we're often offline in our Discord. This is where we have thousands of people that are studying for their A+, their Network Plus, and their Security Plus certifications. There's also a lot of smart people there that already have a number of these certifications that can help out with some of the more nuanced issues and ideas around these exam objectives. Have a look at our Discord. We'd love for you to join us. We are at professormesser.com/discord. Eventually, you will need to take your exam, and you could certainly go out to the CompTIA website and pay full price. But if you are in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory, you can get your voucher at a discount. You don't have to pay full price. I've already knocked off money that you don't need a coupon code. You don't need an extension in your browser. You only need to visit this link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/vouchers. And the vouchers are already discounted. Some of them are discounted quite a bit. So this may be a great way to save a little bit of money. Not only are you saving money, I want to give you something a little bit extra. So if you purchase a voucher from my site, you're eligible to download and read through my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook I wrote that lists out all of the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years when taking these CompTIA exams. I even give you some strategies you can use during the exam to give yourself a couple of extra points, hopefully. So have a look at those. Those vouchers are available at professormesser.com/vouchers. Now, what about that question we asked earlier? Let's see how you did with this. The question asked, a company would like to minimize the chance of data corruption if a database server was to unexpectedly lose power. Which of the following backup strategies would be the best choice? Would it be journaling, encryption, snapshots, offsite storage, or replication? Let's close the poll and see how you did. Last month, we had almost an even distribution between all of these. This month, very different. I think we've learned something maybe from last month, or maybe we've now remembered the things that we needed to know, because you can see that journaling is 45% of the vote, almost half of you. 23% said offsite storage, 15% said snapshots, 15% also said replication, and only 2% said encryption. So although journaling got 45%, the other three also got a large percentage of the vote. But of course, as you can see here, journaling is the right answer. That's what we were hoping to find. Journaling is a way that we can provide a kind of a mini backup in the middle of a transaction. It's kind of putting a transaction before a transaction, if you want to think of it that way. So instead of writing something to disk and corrupting the data, we can store that information in a temporary area we call the journal. And then once we have it in the journal, we can write it to the database, write it to the data file, write it to disk, do something associated with that. Journaling is a great way to focus on understanding how to recover, because if we do happen to now try to write to the disk and now the power goes out, we can go back to the journal to figure out what got interrupted. It's a great way to do that. So instead of having to deal with backups, instead of having to worry about a corruption of the data, this is why we do journaling. Journaling is a great way to do this. It certainly protects against power outages, and it's something that is an important consideration, especially if you're in the world of IT and trying to make sure these systems are as available as possible. When we look at the other options you had here, offsite storage doesn't help you at all if you have data corruption. I guess it sort of does, but we would have to go offsite, get the data, bring it back in, recover from a backup, and we're down that entire time. Whereas with journaling, once the power comes up, we check the data on the drive versus what's in the journal, and we can sync all of that up without having to ever go back to a backup system. So a fantastic way to do it. Replication is another way to make this happen, but replication can be interrupted if the power goes out, again, creating corruption. You know, the journal gets us around that particular problem. Same thing with snapshots. We're in the middle of creating a snapshot and the power goes out. Do we have a good snapshot? Probably not. And if something happens to the original data, we now have nothing to restore from. And encryption doesn't help at all if the power goes out. It helps protect the data, of course, but certainly not something that can help you. In this case, the best answer available of the following backup strategies, journaling would be the best response. That's the only option in this case that would help you at all to avoid any type of data corruption if you lose power. That's a bigger number than we had last month. So we did very good at understanding where we wanted to focus with that particular question, having all of those things there. I like that people in the chat room every once in a while will ask me, is this live or is this pre-recorded? This is, as we sit here today on Wednesday, just after noon Eastern time, it is indeed live, I promise you. It seems like it's recorded. It seems like this is all set up. I haven't done that yet. That would wait till maybe April 1st. We'll do something like that then. We'll just have a completely recorded one. I told you earlier we would have a performance-based question. So now it's time for that. Let's do a performance-based question. Not like you other, Dax wants me to say banana, and I'm not going to do it. So that's not going to happen either. You just have to figure out if we're live some other way. The performance-based questions that you will get on the exam are a handful of questions you get right at the beginning. So these will be questions that will have 2, 3, maybe even 5 different questions, but they are not multiple choice. They are questions that are anything but multiple choice. But instead of calling them anything but multiple choice questions, CompTIA calls them performance-based questions. So they could be fill in the blank. They aren't generally, but they could be. They could be a matching question. They could be a drag and drop question. They might put you at a command prompt, although there aren't any command prompts on the Security Plus exam, so you probably won't get one of those. But they could if there was an option to do something like that. But I have for you today a performance-based question. It's kind of a math question. I know, but there is a little bit of math on the Security Plus exam. And even worse, it's a word-based math question. So these are the worst kind of questions for many people, but you could be asked a question like this on the exam, and we're going to step through it. Here is your performance-based question of the day. The question asks, a company purchases a $2,000 tablet for each remote salesperson. Historically, one of these tablets is lost, stolen, or misplaced each month and results, I guess there should be an S there, in a 100% loss to the organization. Based on this information, I don't think this is the right question, though, that I put online. Is it? I think it is. I just don't think it's the right answer that I put online because I changed some of the numbers in this mix. So here's what we're going to do. we're going to do this right now. I'm going to on the fly do a little bit of checking on my own to make sure that I have the right answer. Yes, it is wrong. I did give you wrong. I want you to calculate differently. In fact, I calculated it differently. It is not a 100% loss to the organization. It's a 50% loss to the organization. So I'm about to change it. You will not see it changed online, but this is live, people. This is the way it works. And we've done this before, by the way. For those of you who've never joined us before, it's kind of a normal thing. It's kind of what we do, an on-the-fly change. Look at that. So this is what I would like you to do, which is a company purchases a $2,000 tablet for each remote salesperson. Historically, one of these tablets is lost, stolen, or misplaced each month and results in a 50% loss to the organization. That's the only thing I changed. I changed it from 100% to 50%. Yeah, a little bit of a switcheroo there, but you got to work on the fly. The real question, of course, is based on this information, calculate the ARO, AV, EF, SLE, and ALE. Oof, there's a lot of abbreviations there, which is sort of part of the question, by the way. We intentionally add these abbreviations because you need to know these abbreviations to have it there. So please pay attention to that 50% that's there. But I tell you what, it won't make a huge difference to the final number, and you'll see why in a moment. Well, it does make a huge difference to the final number, but only in the way that it's calculated. We'll talk about why it's important and why we can use that. You shouldn't need a calculator. You're not given a calculator on the exam. So you don't get a calculator. This is why the numbers you see here are numbers that should be relatively easy to calculate. I did make it something you could pretty much do in your head. I don't think you'll have a problem with that. So lock in what you think these are. Do they give you formulas? They do not. You have to know how to calculate these or how to determine them. I said calculate the ARO, AV, EF, SLE, and ALE. Some of these things really don't require calculations. The numbers are literally on the screen. But you have to know what those abbreviations mean in order to know where to plug in those particular values. So that is what. Now I'll explain in a moment where we get these things from. I'll explain in a moment what section this comes from. Where am I getting this from? All of this will be very clear in a moment. I promise you. I will not leave you hanging in that way. As always, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We want to instead focus on this and the link that we have here. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your question. I really can't change questions on the fly on this, can I? Could I edit the question while... I don't think I can. I don't think I can. I edit? Oh, it says edit. Let's see if I change it on the other screen. Does it update immediately? It sure does. So now you can actually see the question and the link that is on your screen. There you go. I knew I'd be able to have that there. This is not an odd question for the Security Plus. You would absolutely need to know how to know all of these things for the Security Plus exam. This comes directly from the official CompTIA exam objectives. Incredibly important. So make sure you know all about that, being able to make that happen. And as you're putting this in, I know that I have this in Vevox, and I know there is an input that you could put text in, but you don't have to because we're not going to evaluate all of the answers. It's really something that you can make a note if you would like to. But you do need to remember what these are because in Vevox, once you submit your answer, it tends to disappear. You don't see it anymore. So you technically don't have to input this one into Vevox, but I did want to make sure you were able to read it properly on the Vevox front end. This is the only type of question we do during this live stream where we don't compile the answers at the end because it's more of an open-ended text question, if you will. So this is the one that a lot of people are even kind of surprised over questions like this, as we've seen in the chat room, because they're wondering, why do I have to calculate things? Where does this all come from? And this is an important consideration for security because if you want to maintain uptime, availability, you want to keep data safe, you want to be sure that you're budgeting the right monies for your security processes, this is an important part of that. And that's why, of course, it's included. It's been in a number of Security Plus exams through the years. This is not the only version that has ever had this. And I think it's an important consideration. We're often asked to provide budgeting type numbers in the world of IT. And I think this gives us a little bit of insight into the process that we would need to go through to do that. Let's see what we believe the answer might be with this one. The question asks, a company purchases a $2,000 tablet for each remote salesperson. Historically, one of these tablets is lost, stolen, or misplaced each month and results in a 50% loss to the organization. I edited it and could have put an S in, but did I? I did not. Based on this information, calculate the ARO, AV, EF, SLE, and ALE. So first, I added to this screen a summary of what these crazy acronyms mean. I mean, I looked at the list of acronyms in the back of the official exam objectives. I think I counted them once, and there's somewhere around 7 million acronyms. Well, it seems that way. There's pages and pages of acronyms. So this is certainly some of them that you would need to know. ARO is the annualized rate of occurrence. AV is an asset value. EF is an exposure factor. SLE is a single loss expectancy, and ALE is an annualized loss expectancy. Now, some of those terms, once you know what the words are, you might be able to put one in there to be able to answer what these numbers might be. So let's step through each one of these and let's see how I calculated it. Let's see if it's correct in the way that I calculated it. It's a word problem with math. We might all be making mistakes. So let's start with our annualized rate of occurrence. This is how many times in a year does this type of thing happen? And as we can see, a company, although they purchased the tablets, historically, one of these tablets is lost, stolen, or misplaced each month. So every month we lose one of these. That's one of those scenarios. So now we just have to count that up. If we know how many months are in a year, do the math, carry the 4. Okay, so we have 12 months in a year. That means there are 12 incidents that we can expect to occur. Our annualized rate of occurrence is one tablet every 12 months for a total of 12. There we go. Now, the next on our list is the asset value. The asset value is how much the asset is worth. How much does it cost to purchase that asset? What would that asset be worth? And if we look at our company purchase history, we can see that these are $2,000 tablets. We doing good so far? Good. I think it sounds right. I think we're doing okay. Next on our list is the exposure factor. Oh, finally, we've hit something that is not immediately obvious to us. An exposure factor is, for this type of event, how much exposure do we have each time it occurs, which gives us an idea of how much of that asset do we lose. Now, in this case, it may be that the asset is stolen, which would be 100% lost to the organization, but it isn't always stolen. Sometimes, I guess, there's a way to recover some usability from it. And that's why we've been given numbers of a 50% loss to the organization. So it's not 100% loss, which I guess is good, but it has a 50% loss. Maybe we're able to take the parts and use them, or maybe we're able to take the storage out and move it to another machine and save a little bit of money. So if we calculate, the exposure is a percentage represented in decimal form. So we know that is a 50% loss to the organization. That means that our exposure factor is 0.5. 0.5 is the same as 50%. Our single loss expectancy, now we're going to get into calculations, really detailed calculations. A single loss expectancy means that each time this event occurs, how much are we losing? Well, you have to take into account how much the purchase of a new one is going to be. And we have to be able to calculate this based on the exposure factor. So we multiply our asset value by the exposure factor. In this case, it would be a $2,000 tablet multiplied by 0.05, which is effectively dividing by 2. See how I did that? See, I got a few math skills there, which means that our single loss expectancy, every time this event occurs, we lose $1,000. That is the number that we're going with. That is the detail of making that happen. So this is, that's an important number, because now we will use that number to calculate an annualized loss expectancy, We know that an annualized loss expectancy is going to occur every year, which means there will be 12 times this number because we're calculating it based on what happens once a month. And that means if we multiply our single loss expectancy by the ARO, our annualized, well, this would not be our annualized rate of occurrence, it would be single loss expectancy. See, I knew I put something wrong in there with having that. Our ARO, yeah, the rate of occurrence, we did get it right, times our single loss expectancy. I have things on my screen that are blocking my view that you don't see. It does show us 12 times 1,000 or 12,000. That is our annualized loss expectancy. And that is the number that somebody says, what do we need to consider? How much money do we need to set aside? What type of financial hit are we going to take for deploying these tablets to everybody this year? There is the answer to that, $12,000. So if they come to you and say, we need to have insurance for all of these pieces of equipment, how much should we insure ourselves for? Should we self-insure this one? Should we have a third party insure it for us? Should we simply have extras that we purchase and it's a write-off? There's lots of things you can do on the financial side of things. The exam is not asking you for a lot of corporate tax detail, thankfully, but it does want you to know, what is your exposure? How much money are you going to lose with this particular project from a security perspective? And you will need to make sure that you have a budget to cover this, because when somebody loses their tablet, they're not going back to purchasing and say, I just need to purchase a new tablet. They're going to show up to the IT team and say, that tablet you gave me is gone. I need a new tablet, please. And your responsibility will be to get them the tools that they need, at least in most cases. That seems to be the case. So you will be responsible for having a way to get them those new pieces of the puzzle. So make sure you are familiar with those. That is the answers we were looking for. I wanted to quickly step back. Some of you were asking about where this information comes from. This is from a video that I have on 5.2 is the section of the exam objectives for the SY0-701. And I cover all of these in my video called Risk Analysis. This is from, if you go to your official CompTIA exam objectives, this is in section 5.2. And you will need to know some of that information to be able to understand how to calculate the annualized rate of occurrence, the asset value, the exposure factor, the single loss expectancy, the annualized loss expectancy as well. And as I mentioned there, this is a very good example of why you need to know the dollars behind this. There's also more of a qualitative analysis that has to be covered as well. That's also in this risk analysis section. So this really does focus on just numbers, a quantitative value. But of course, if you lose uptime and you lose data, and there's other things that happen when somebody loses their laptop, a lack of efficiency, you're not able to close a deal. There are some qualitative things behind the scenes too. So it's not always about money. It can sometimes be about other things as well. So there's the answer that we were looking for all 5 of those values. Make sure you're familiar not only with the abbreviations and what they mean, but how to go through this step and calculate these. It's a relatively straightforward set of calculations. Fortunately, there's not a lot of math on the exam. This is probably it. When it comes to math on the exam, there's not much more than this. So this is maybe relatively easy to think of as well. And now you know it. Now you've gone through a performance-based question, and now you're ready if any of these topics happen to come up on the exam, either as a performance-based question, or this could be peppered into a number of multiple choice questions as well. Let's now move on to some multiple choice questions. Here is one that asks a security, now I'm looking on my side and I'm not seeing this question on my list. I'm wondering if I have the right list in front of me. We are going to jump over here while you guys talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to bring up a couple of things on my side and see if I can view this. I think I've got this. Yes, here is a better one. Here's one that actually is in front of me. Here's a question that we have. It asks, an attacker was able to access files on a web server which would not normally be directly accessible from the web browser. Which of the following was most likely used to access these files? The possible answers are, if I can bring up possible answers, I happen to have some here, are, and remember, no answers in the chat room, please no hints in the chat room. They are logic bomb, DNS poisoning, directory traversal, worm, or brute force attack. I don't know that this was the one I wanted to show either. There's a lot of things going on my side that are, I thought, oh, you know what I did? I know what it is. I know where it is. Here we go. We're going to do a different one. This is, by the way, the one, yeah, that's exactly where we go with this. I think we've got it ready on our side. An attacker was able to access files on a web server which would not normally be directly accessible from the web browser. Which of the following was most likely used to access these files? Was it logic bomb, DNS poisoning, directory traversal, worm, or brute force attack? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. This should be one that you might be able to be familiar with. If you've ever done any work in a browser or on a web server, maybe you're familiar with this one. It is a type of attack that you do need to be aware of in the Security Plus exam. Make sure you have a look at those. Quite a bit to pour through. If you are ever looking at these exams and trying to determine the best way to focus, stepping through the exam objectives is a great way to do it. But you not only need to go through the objectives, you really need to understand how these attacks operate. So make sure you're familiar when you want to do that. Let's have a look at these. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, an attacker was able to access files on a web server which would not normally be directly accessible from the web browser. Which of the following was most likely used to access these files? Is it a logic bomb, DNS poisoning, directory traversal, worm, or brute force attack? And if we stop our poll, we can see that 68% of you say the answer is directory traversal. That is a pretty big number as an answer, but 20% of you said the answer is DNS poisoning is what did it. We also have single digits. 6% said a brute force attack, 5% said a worm, and 1% said a logic bomb. 68% is a pretty big number. And if we look, we can see that indeed that was the correct answer. That's exactly what we were looking for, was directory traversal. Well, it's great, but what is directory traversal? You might also hear this referred to as path traversal. This is when you can access parts of the web server's file system that you really should not have access to. This is almost always associated with a misconfiguration of the web browser or the web server, not your browser, but the server that is on that web server. And what you have to make sure is that the web server is configured not to allow that type of access. Sometimes it's not related to a misconfiguration. Maybe it is a vulnerability in part of the web server. This is why we always tell you, make sure you keep everything up to date with the latest versions, because if there is a bug, especially a security bug, someone may be able to take advantage of that bug and gain access to the file system on that server, which is never a good idea. We want to make sure that we have complete control over that system. Make sure that you are familiar with these. This is something where if you're ever seeing code, if you're ever on your exam and you see some code that has ... you may be wondering, what is a ... A ... both in Windows and in Linux, means that you're referencing the directory prior to this one. So going back one directory, and by putting a slash, you're doing this multiple times. Go back one directory, then go back another directory, then go back another directory. Almost the reverse of typing in a directory name to move forward. By using that little shortcut and sending it in through your web browser, if the web server is misconfigured, it might actually provide you with access to that. And that, for example, if it's a Windows web server, you might be able to gain access to the system files on that computer. That's never a good idea. So something to always keep in mind, directory traversal or path traversal is definitely not what we were hoping to see. 68% of you got this one absolutely correct. That's what we wanted. That's the correct answer. You really got that one right on. Well done. Great numbers on that one as well. One of the things that if you are ever working through, in fact, before we kind of get to this next one, if you're working through these problems, you will see a number of different types of attacks. So I wanted to give you another question about a different kind of attack. Since we're on this mode of attacks, I thought it might be good to use this. This question, a little bit different, but again, is focusing on the security of this system. The question asks, an attacker is attempting to use a SQL injection attack against a public web server, but a security appliance is blocking the attack. Which of the following would best describe this appliance? Is it 802.1x, load balancer, WAF, network tap, or VPN concentrator? We've got a number to choose from here. We have a lot of different attacks that are listed in the exam objectives. You definitely need to be have a familiarity with the attacks, but not only with the attacks themselves, but how to protect against those attacks. This question again asks, an attacker is attempting to use a SQL injection attack against a public web server, but a security appliance is blocking the attack. Which of the following would describe this appliance? Is it 802.1x, load balancer, WAF, network tap, or VPN concentrator? If you think you know the answer, please note answers in the chat room. You want to go to the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to answer this question. I'm just happy that the information on my screen matches the information on your screen at this point. Whenever you're doing a live event, you're always worried that that's going to be the case. Again, as always, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Follow the link on your screen to submit your answer at any time at professormesser.com/QA. That would be a great place to go for making that happen. If you're ever in the world of attacks and protecting against attacks, this might be a gimme. But if you've never run into this before, this might be one where you really have to parse these out. Let's see how you did. The question again asks, an attacker is attempting to use a SQL injection attack against a public web server, but a security appliance is blocking the attack. Which of the following would best describe this appliance? Is it 802.1x, load balancer, WAF, network tap, or VPN concentrator? We're going to stop our poll and see how you did. Wow, big numbers. 80% of you believe the answer is WAF. W-A-F. Am I saying it right? WAF. It's hard to say this into a microphone that is trying to block the plosives. It's a WAF. That's what we have. 9% said 802.1x, 6% said VPN concentrator, 4% say network tap. Nobody said load balancer. Wouldn't it be great if that was the answer? That load balancer was the answer? Well, let's see what the answer really is. Of course, it's not. It is a WAF in our list. That was the answer that we were looking for. That's because a WAF, it's a firewall, but probably not the type of firewall you're most comfortable or familiar with. It's a very specialized form of a firewall. This is one that focuses on applications. It is a web application firewall. So therefore, it's going to focus on HTTPS, HTTP type communication on a device. Many WAFs also do other types of applications as well, but that's just the one most people will primarily focus on when they describe or talk about using a WAF. A WAF is looking at the actual input into that application. So it's more than just allowing or stopping an application name or allowing or stopping a particular port number or IP address. This is really focused on what is the app doing. And that obviously is why we call this a web application firewall, because it's really trying to determine what's going on with the input and output from that single application. So therefore, if there is something unusual with somebody typing information in that really should not normally be there, for instance, a SQL injection, there's a very good example of what could happen when that occurs. SQL injections are something WAFs are very good at stopping, because SQL injections can certainly affect the ability of an application to provide security. That would be a very non-secure application to make that happen. Web application firewalls is a very good way to do that. And it's actually in the PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, that web application firewalls is a perfect way to be able to stop things like an application attack, specifically in this case, one that is focused on SQL injections. That is a very good way. I have a web application firewall here. You can kind of see some of the things that it might stop. There's a SQL injections that were in here, the cross-site scriptings it found and blocked. We've got error type responses are being suppressed so that people won't see them. We've got more cross-site scripting. So this is a nice summary of very common attacks that a web application firewall would be able to block. And indeed, 80% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you'd like to learn more about web application firewalls and other firewall types, such as next generation firewalls, for example, you can go to our SY0-701 course, section 3.2. This question came from the video named Firewall Types. That is where it would go. The web application firewalls tend to sit either next to a next generation firewall. I have created implementations on networks where you had a next generation firewall and right behind it was a web application firewall. You could have done it different, could have done it the other way as well. And we've also had situations, and you've probably seen this if you're familiar with next generation firewalls. Many of those next generation firewalls have some web application firewall functionality built into them. Like most things, of course, a standalone device tends to be a little more specific, but there are some capabilities. I know if you ever get into next generation firewall, you'll notice there's probably an IPS there built in, and there's very often a method looking for things like SQL injection. So you might be able to capture some of these with even a traditional next generation firewall just by going through and having a look at that. Well, that was the answer to this one. If you answered web application firewall, 80% of you got this one absolutely right. Well done with that one. Now, if you've already seen, we've gone through a number of different types of questions as we've done this today. In fact, we've gone through a lot of different kind of questions already, and we're just getting started. These questions and the type of topics you would get on the exam are many and varied. There's a lot you could be asked for on the Security Plus exam, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different objectives that come directly from the exam objectives. Things like network design, cloud computing, protocols, encryption, security controls, et cetera, et cetera. I would love it if you watch every single one of my videos so you can learn all of that information. But the Security Plus video course, 121 videos. There's over 15 hours of information associated with our Security Plus course. So what I did was put everything into one document so that you could watch the videos, but still have all of the notes from that video in one place. These are my course notes. And if you look at the course notes, this is the PDF version of the course notes. It goes through every video in everything that we are doing. It goes step by step in order, the same order that we're using for our course. All of the text of the videos, it's in here. All of the important tables, it's in here. All the important charts, they're in here. All the graphics that I've created in these videos, they are in our course notes. This is a single consolidated set of notes that is probably the most comprehensive you will ever find because we created it to be that way. Our course notes are not only available in this PDF form, they're also available in a physical form. Here's the physical course notes. The physical course notes, of course, are identical to the digital versions, but you can take them and touch them and turn the pages. They are in full color. They are perfect bound, as they say, which is what we use for that softback kind of binding. This is one that also, if you get the physical notes, we will print this out on demand and send this to you in the mail, wherever you happen to be in the world. When you purchase it, though, you also get access to the digital edition for free. No extra cost. So you can download the digital edition immediately and start using it right now. Those are our course notes. It's also a great way to support the things that we do here. Helps keeps the light on. And if you are interested at all in something that we think will help you a lot with your studies, you can find out more. I've got even a video overview of this available at professormesser.com/701cn for our 701 course notes. So there you go. You have at least something where you could step through and learn a little bit more about these topics. Well, I now need to adjust my screen on this side because I need to make sure that I get you the next good question that I have. In fact, I have one for you. Here's the next question on our list. It asks, a company's security policies have been updated to require SAE. Which of these would need to follow this new policy? Would it be MDM, email server, VPN concentrator, DLP, or access points? Oh, we have a few to choose from there. A company's security policies have been updated to require SAE. Which of these would need to follow this new policy? Would it be MDM, email server, VPN concentrator, DLP, or access points? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. We're having to think about this one. I always look at the numbers that are being submitted at the top. I'm sort of cheating. Now, I could just look at the numbers because I have access to the numbers in real time as you're putting them in. But what fun is that? I like to be as surprised as you are when we answer these, when we click the button to find out what you thought the right answer might be. So this is one that hopefully you are familiar. Kind of a test of your acronym knowledge, but there is also a hook back to the real world, which is a very common thing on the exam. It's certainly good to know acronyms, and sometimes knowing the acronym will help you with answering the question, but that's not always the case. And very often, CompTIA is giving you a question with an acronym, not only to test the acronym part of it, but very often, almost always, you have to know how to apply that technology. And this is a very good question to see how well you apply the information that you're putting in here. Mr. Pineapple in the chat says, I don't know, I just picked one, which, by the way, is a fantastic strategy. I highly recommend that. I'm not kidding. That really is a good strategy. You should never leave a question blank on your exam. You should always take a guess. We don't know a lot about the grading process for these exams, but we do know that if you leave a question blank, you don't get any points. If you get it right, you get some points. If you get it wrong, you don't get any points. So really, there's no penalty for guessing when you get through that process. So make sure you are familiar with these different questions and how they work. This might be also a good place to understand where you might be able to do a little bit more studying, because there might be some topics here that you're just not familiar enough with, and there's a lot of topics on this exam. Let's see how you did with this one. A company's security policies have been updated to require SAE. Which of these would need to follow this new policy? Would it be the MDM, the email server, the VPN concentrator, DLP, or access points? What did you choose? Ooh, we're a little torn. In fact, all of our answers, double digits. We don't often get that. But the plurality of you, practically a majority, 47% of you say the answer is an access point. 19% of you said the answer is an MDM. We also have 13% that said the answer is a VPN concentrator. We've got 11% that said email server, and 10% say DLP. So this is one where we really do need to understand SAE before we can really answer the question. SAE is where we are focusing on being able to properly authenticate, in this particular case, to a wireless network. That's where you would see this very often. This is a new feature that was included with the update to WPA, specifically WPA3. They have changed the way that you authenticate across the wireless network. And they did that because previous versions of WPA would send the session key across the network, and there would be a bit of brute force that you could do with that traffic going back and forth to be able to make that happen. Well, if you want to be able to have a more secure wireless network where someone would not be able to brute force any of your authentication keys, you would want to use SAE. Again, this is a new feature in WPA3. It's referred to as a simultaneous authentication of equals. This is very similar in style and in form to a Diffie-Hellman key exchange. So this is a way that you could very easily perform key exchange and have it secure even on a wireless network. We're taking the idea of security that we have for WPA2, which is still very, very good security, and we're adding even more security to it. So we're just enhancing the security that we always have. You might hear this referred to as the dragonfly handshake. I don't know why, but that's what they call it. I don't know that that really helps you very much. I think for the exam, it's probably better that you understand a simultaneous authentication of equals, or SAE. This is a lot of great features, especially for authentication, were added in WPA3. This is only one of those. There's a lot of great features that were thrown in. Things like being able to give everyone the same key to get into the network, but be able to make it very a unique authentication capability and a unique encryption function. A lot of great features are in WPA3, and you definitely need to know about them. So let's look at this question again. A company's security policies have been updated to require SAE. Which of these would need to follow this new policy? So if you get a piece of paper and says, going forward, all of the devices on your network using this functionality need to have SAE, they're speaking specifically about access points. And that's what 47% of you chose, was indeed access points. That is the correct answer. That's what we were looking for, is the access points. Now, there are other places in here. A lot of other people focused on, 19% of you focused on MDMs. MDMs are responsible for managing remote devices, specifically remote mobile devices. That's a mobile device manager. But SAE is something you configure on an access point. It's not something you configure on your workstation. So this is why we would focus instead on access points as being the focus of this. In fact, if your SAE would also have other devices involved that are not mobile devices, the computers on someone's desk would also need to communicate to that access point using SAE. So it's not solely something that you can hope to configure in an MDM, and you will not be managing your access points from an MDM anyway. There's probably a separate access point management system for being able to do that. 13% of you said VPN concentrator. In this case, SAE is not related to VPNs or the communications that we do between VPNs. This is, at the moment, something that is relatively exclusive to the world of 802.11 wireless networking. 11% of you said email server. As we know now, SAE is not related to email or the communication process that is used between email servers. And DLP is data loss prevention. That is sometimes software, sometimes hardware, sometimes both on a network. Data loss prevention is designed exactly as the name implies, to prevent any type of data loss. Somebody starts emailing out credit card numbers, or somebody is sending a file that has social security numbers that are in the clear. Data loss prevention will see that, will block it, and will prevent that data from getting out anywhere else. In this case, the answer is relatively clear, and 47% of you got this one absolutely correct. It is indeed access points. That's what we were looking for. That is the correct answer, and 47% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video, or if you are here live and you're hoping to earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for this hour. This is something that's commonly used for people that are renewing their certification. If you don't have any certs yet, this doesn't really apply to you. But if you are some of the folks that are working towards understanding what you need to know to be able to pass this exam, you will certainly, to renew this exam, you will certainly want to listen in if you're collecting these CEUs. The way that you would earn this CEU is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a link there that says Contact Us. In that Contact Us link, it will bring up a form. Please put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put October 2025 Security Plus. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, SAE access points. Those are the super secret code words of the month. You could also put anything else you'd like in there. If you'd like to send a note, if you'd like to tell me where you are with your studies, or you'd like to tell me why you're getting this continuing education unit credit, I'd like to read these things. I'd like to know why you're going through this process and what you're doing. You don't have to put anything if you don't want to. I just wanted to let you know that I do read through every single one of these that comes in. So again, to earn your CEU, go to the top or bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us. In the form that comes up, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put October 2025 Security Plus. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, SAE access points. You can use those continuing education units. Apply those towards a renewal of your existing Security Plus certification or of other certifications as well. Let's keep going. We got time for some more questions, so let's get a couple more in anyway. Next on our list is this one, I hope, that says, while preparing for a penetration test, a tech has found a screenshot on LinkedIn showing server names and IP addresses. Which of the following would best describe this information gathering process? Is this brute force, data exfiltration, phishing, blue team, or passive reconnaissance? It's got to be one of these, right? You think you know the answer? We'll see if we can. Oh, we've got the lower third up. You can always click over to that. The question again asks, while preparing for a penetration test, a tech has found a screenshot on LinkedIn showing server names and IP addresses. Which of the following would best describe this information gathering process? Is it brute force, data exfiltration, phishing, blue team, or passive reconnaissance? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to lock in your answer using the link that is on your screen. Maybe this is one that you've even worked through. Penetration testing is such a fascinating part of security. It's probably over fascinating. We always see penetration tests and hacking tests it's always in Hollywood movies. It's always on television shows. It's always on a streaming service. You see some type of someone at a keyboard hacking into the system. So it certainly has people's minds thinking about the ways that hackers do this type of thing. But this is one that isn't really one of those hacking type scenarios. It's one that somebody found information on LinkedIn, which, by the way, happens way too often to make this happen. So it's important to know where it fits in the world of IT security. Maybe a couple of these are blending together, but of course the question tells you which of the following would best describe this information gathering process. So you're going to have to narrow down all of the different options and decide which one really is the best answer and find out what it is. Let's see how you did. While preparing for a penetration test, a tech has found a screenshot on LinkedIn showing server names and IP addresses. Which of the following would best describe this information gathering process? Is it brute force, data exfiltration, phishing, blue team, or passive reconnaissance? We will close the poll and see what you think the answer is. Again, big numbers, but did we hit right with this one? 74% of you say the answer is passive reconnaissance. 20%, however, say data exfiltration, and then it goes down to single digits from there. It drops dramatically. 2% say blue team, 2% say phishing, 1% say brute force. So this is one where 74% is such a large number. We go with that one. It is passive reconnaissance is the information gathering process that's going on here. This is something very commonly done by people who are brought in to perform some type of penetration testing or security testing in a corporate environment. They don't just take the information you give them, they also start doing additional research. They do maybe some open source identification of this information, some OSINT, being able to look on public forums, LinkedIn, Facebook. It is surprising the things that you see in the backgrounds of pictures. It's surprising the things that you see on monitors that are next to people. This is what happens all the time. Some of you recall the warnings that went out in Hawaii a number of years ago saying there was an inbound nuclear attack. And they did some interviews with the people that send out those warnings, those text messages. And in the interviews, they had a yellow sticky, as I recall, on the monitor behind the person showing the password for the wireless network. I think I'm getting that right. By the way, that happens all the time. That was not the only situation where you could find that, but that was one that was on the news. Everybody watching the television, everybody watching the YouTube clips, everybody watching the Instagram reels, they all saw that. They all knew what was going on there. This is something that is very useful for people that are doing reconnaissance because they can learn as much as they want here, and really nobody knows that they learned it because they're on a third-party service. You're on LinkedIn, you're on some social media site, you're even on the company's own web server. finding this information on their corporate website. This is a great way to gather information without letting anyone know that you're even looking for information. That's why we refer to it as passive reconnaissance, because it doesn't really leave an electronic trail that people would be able to stumble across. You look like everybody else who's going to LinkedIn. You look like everybody else who's going to your corporate web server and bringing up this information. It looks just like normal traffic on the network. So this is a really good example of why we chose, in this case, passive reconnaissance as that answer. Now, why wouldn't it be data exfiltration? Well, nobody exfiltrated. The exfiltration part of this means that somebody has data in your network, they grabbed this data, and they took it outside of your network. They exfiltrated it. It's such a long, involved name. They stole the data. They took the data out of the network. And generally they take it not only out of the network, they take it out of the building, they take it out of the secure area, if you want to think of it that way. So this is a really good example, this data exfiltration. Nobody took this data out of the network. They simply had that data in an image that was shown on LinkedIn. So the data is still in the network. Nobody really touched the data. They simply displayed the data. And that does not qualify as exfiltration. Nobody actively grabbed that data and took it out of the network. Now, some penetration testing folks will try to get people to exfiltrate data for them, because they'll show up and say, hey, I'll give you $100 if you give me a database. I will provide you. This happens a lot with malware attackers, where they want to get the malware inside of a company. They will pay an employee to simply plug in a USB drive somewhere in the company, and they'll pay them quite a bit for doing things like that. That is certainly not something we want to run into. And in this case, it's not data exfiltration either. That scenario would not be phishing. We were not trying to get that information by pretending to be someone else or to tricking someone into giving us this information. In fact, this user on LinkedIn gave this information out willingly. In fact, it probably didn't even realize they were doing it. And suddenly now it's public information. Blue team describes a way of managing security on a network. Red team is more offensive. Blue team is more defensive. So this is a description of a security posture or even of a security analysis posture, but it does not describe an information gathering process. And lastly, brute force, very commonly associated with a way to determine passwords if all you have is a hash, but brute force has a number of different characteristics and ways to be able to use it. But we didn't have to brute force anything. We didn't have to try to determine what this data was by reverse engineering anything. There was no reverse engineering to do. You simply had to look at the picture and you had server names and IP addresses. Now, in most cases, I would think server names and IP addresses relatively benign, especially on people's internal networks. I'll give you, everybody got a pencil. I'm going to give you the name. I'm going to give you the IP address of my internet router. Are you ready? 192.168.1.1. Wait, is that the same as your internet router? It's probably the same as most internet routers when you start looking at it. An internal IP address doesn't necessarily mean it is sensitive information, but it certainly is information that if somebody was on the inside of your network, they would be able to use it. So especially useful for something like a penetration test. So that's why in this case, passive reconnaissance was the answer we were looking for. And I didn't have the numbers up here, but if you look at the bottom of our passive reconnaissance slide, this came from section 5.5 of the exam objectives, specifically the exam called penetration tests. That is the video that describes this particular topic and how it fits into the big scheme of things. This is also, you're probably not going to get very far trying to hack my network if you're using the IP address of my internet router. Not going to help you a lot at all. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's fit one more question in, shall we? I would like to do this. This question a little bit different. The same rules apply, of course. I would like you to be able to not answer in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Instead, I would like you to be able to look through a question that I put into my practice exams book. All the questions we've done so far have been questions that I have written specifically for this live stream. I do that every month, so every question you get on every live stream is going to be something new and different. But of course, you might be ready to start studying to take your exam. How do you really test yourself? How do you really practice to see if you really do understand the topics, the abbreviations, those acronyms, all of the things that you need? When I started looking around at some of the practice exams on the internet, some of them were not so great. Some of them were inaccurate. Some of them covered topics that weren't even on the exam anymore. They were well outdated. And other exams weren't written with a similar style or a similar tone as the actual exam, which I think maybe did not prepare people as best they could. So I thought, well, we can fix that. Let's write our own practice exams book. And that's exactly what we did. There are 3 separate practice exams, 90 questions in each of these, 5 performance-based questions, and 85 multiple choice questions in each of those 3 exams. So there's quite a bit. In fact, we have both the digital version and, of course, the physical edition. Look how thick the physical edition is, 381 pages, all questions, all answers. And the next question we have is specific to this practice exam. I guess it would be good if I brought it up on the screen so you could see it. This is a question in my exam. Let's see if I could put me in there somewhere. There we go. There we are. It is a question from the Security Plus practice exams. It's question A84. It's on page 28 of the book. And the question asks, a web-based manufacturing company processes monthly charges to credit card information saved in the customer's profile. All of the customer information is encrypted and protected with additional authentication factors. Which of the following would be the justification for these security controls? Would it be chain of custody, password vaulting, compliance reporting, or sandboxing? So you get to choose which one of those it might be. Now, this is a PDF, which means if you have a stylus, you could write on the screen. If you have, you're in a PDF reader, you may be able to annotate some of it and maybe comment or at least highlight different aspects of the question. Notice also that we have a summary. If you just want to know if the answer is A, B, C, or D, you can go to page 33. If you really want a really detailed breakdown of the question and the answers, I highly recommend you have a look at my details page, which is a separate page, in this case, page 122. The one thing I didn't want to have you doing all day, though, was scrolling forward and scrolling back through a PDF. We've all done that. Nobody likes doing that. So on my book, when you have the digital version, when you highlight over the details, page 122, even though we're currently on page 128, I'm going to click the details, takes us right to page 122. There's no scrolling. There's no hunting. You don't have to figure it out. It just goes right to it. So we have the question at the top and the possible answers, and it says the answer is C, compliance reporting, and we explain why that is the correct answer by telling you why the right answer is right, which so far sounds pretty good. Most practice exams stop right there. One of the things, though, that I think is important during the study process is being able to give feedback and redirection if you get a question wrong. And this is the time you get questions wrong, is during your practice phase. It's trying to do this testing process. So in my practice exams book, I of course explain why the right answer is right. But on every single question, I explain why the wrong answers are wrong. And each one of the wrong answers also is associated with topics that are directly from the exam objectives. So although it is a single question with obviously a single right answer, in this case, there are also multiple topics to learn from. So you're almost learning 4 different topics on every single exam or every single exam question. One of the things I even tell people, even if you get it right, don't skip over the wrong answers, because you might have information in here that helps you understand more about chain of custody, helps you understand more about password vaulting, helps you understand more about sandboxing, and it helps you understand why those weren't the right answers, so that next time you see this topic, you'll understand more about what that is referring to. And if you didn't understand any of this, which sometimes happens, I have links that go directly back to the video that was used to create this question. In this case, it's Objective 5.4, and the name of the video is Compliance. In fact, if you have your phone, you could scan that QR code right now, and it will take you over to that video on the Professor Messer website. You can watch the video, then come back to the question. Now, once you're done with this question, in my PDF reader, and most PDF readers, there's a back button. Did you know that? So I'm just going to click the back button, click. I don't have to scroll back up to page 28. I just hit the back button on where I left off. And then I can scroll down and go to the next question that's on my list. Those are my practice exam book questions. That's the process. That's how you can learn more in a shorter period of time with information that is specific to this exam version and questions that have been written in the same style and the same tone as the actual exam. But all of these questions I have written. These is 100% human written accurate questions for the current version of the exam. Another important part of this. It's so hard to find that for some reason in today's internet. And maybe this is something that can help you as well. If you're interested in this, you can learn more at professormesser.com/securitype. Another great way to understand how to find this information and these questions and how you might be able to sift through the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different exam objectives. Speaking of exam objectives, if you don't have a copy of the official exam objectives, you should get one of these. It is a free document directly from CompTIA. It is on the CompTIA website. You can find it, a link over to the CompTIA website at professormesser.com/objectives. But if I go over to the CompTIA website right now, maybe even I'll show you where this is. It can be a little tricky to find these days because they changed where they put everything on the CompTIA website. So here we are on the CompTIA website. If you click on maybe certifications, it will give you a list of all the certifications you can choose from. Boy, CompTIA has a lot of certifications. But we're going to go down to Security Plus. And when you click Security Plus, it brings you up to a summary of the objectives. We don't want the summary. We want the detailed objectives. Scroll down. You're going to see a red box. I've already filled in my red box with my email address, and it remembered it. So this allows me to download the latest objectives. Your red box will look a little different because it will say, give me an email address. That's the trade. It's a free thing, but you still have to provide an email address. And then you can download the objectives in English, Japanese, Portuguese, Spanish, Thai, and they even have some practice questions in there as well that might help you out. That's where you would find the objectives. And again, absolutely free to download those. Something that will give you a list of every possible objective that could be asked of you on the exam. When you download it, it will look a lot like this. Give you a summary. In fact, you can see I've even annotated the one that I've been using. This is the checklist I use when I make my video course. So you know that my video course covers every topic that could be asked of you because I covered every topic that is in this list. Definitely where you should go to find this very comprehensive list. And for those of you that like acronyms, I know most of you love acronyms. And in the back of this list is an acronym list. In fact, pages upon pages upon pages of acronyms. If you didn't have enough acronyms before, I promise you, you have enough acronyms now. There are plenty to choose from. They're in the back of this set of exam objectives. It's a great resource. Make sure you take advantage of that. We do one of these study groups for Security Plus every month. Stick around because we're not done yet. We have another hour of Q&A coming up in just a moment. But I wanted to remind you that we do one of these study groups. November is kind of an odd month for me. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Normally we have A+ in the first week and Network Plus in the second week. As the holidays get closer, the schedule gets a little more chaotic. So in November, I have A+ on the 17th and 19th. We have Network Plus on the 21st and the 25th of November, the week of Thanksgiving here in the US. We will be doing our Security Plus study group, which is kind of at the end of the month, sort of when we normally would do the study group as well. We'd love for you to come back for that one as well. We have such fun when we're able to work through and go through these questions, learn more about Security Plus and the terms and topics that we need to be familiar with. November 25th, if we have to change that date, you will always know when the next date is going to be because I always keep the calendar updated at the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/calendar. Well, we're through a first hour of this, an hour plus. You guys have been great. Stick around, though, for the after show. I want to answer your questions next, and that's what we do in the second part of this study group. Don't forget that we have our links on our website that will take you to our favorite social media sites. We have our professormesser.com/Discord/X/LinkedIn/Facebook/YouTube. Wherever you want to find us online, that's a great way to find us at professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us at. Very, very simple. And if we're not on the site you would like us to be on, let me know. Maybe I should be over there. I'll add it to my list. Absolutely. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers if you would like to save a little bit of money over the CompTIA site and get our bonus Exam Hacks ebook. You can find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. And our course notes, of course, are on our website. We have professormesser.com/701SB for our success bundle. That is a great way also to support the things that we do here. Stay right where you are. We are going to now take your questions in the after show. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. We will see you next time on the Professor Messer Security Plus study group. Now it's time to do an after show, everybody. Let me take a sip. One moment, please. We'll get this ready to go. Much better. Now is the part of the live stream where, as I've mentioned before, I have done no type of preparation for, because it's impossible to prep, because now's the time where you get to ask questions of me. This is the way that we would make this work. The way that you would do that is right here. You could submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. I will be moderating these questions in real time during the session, so you're not going to see it pop up on the screen, but it is in my list that you don't get to see. I will sift through those. If you'd like to submit a question at any time, either in the first hour or the second hour, you can do it at professormesser.com/QA. That QA stands for something. I need to have a look at my notes and see what that's referring to. I'm now going to go into the polls that I have here and look at the questions that you have submitted for me. There's a lot that you guys have submitted already. Thank you so much for sending those in, by the way. There's a lot to pour through as we go into this list. And these questions can be about almost anything. You could ask a question about Security Plus or IT certifications in general, or IT in general. We've got years of experience on this side of the microphone. If you want to talk about large-scale networking, cybersecurity implementations, what you do in the field, how you get those particular skills, how you work up to that particular level. We take a lot of career questions during the second hour. You are more than ready to submit those. Follow the link on your screen, and you can do exactly that. Let's talk about security. This is really an important consideration when you're trying to get that first job in IT. This is a big push for us making these training courses. I want everybody to get a job in IT. Part of the reason is that I've already had those jobs in IT. I started at the bottom as a field service technician, really before that as a operator on a mainframe computer system in a computing center, and moved up through the ranks through a lot of late nights and hard work, making sure that I understood operating systems, learned a lot about server systems, learned about networking, and ultimately that brought me into the world of cybersecurity, where I got to work in a very large-scale implementation and design of next-generation firewall systems. So that is one that really showed me that the industry itself allows you to find the jobs that are going to be most interesting for you, but also make great career choices. So this is another one of those times where we want to talk a little bit about that. So let's go to the question that was submitted by Anonymous, who says, "Hello, Messer." Maybe reading too much into that. "I'm still struggling with trying to get an entry-level job for more hands-on experience. Should I try to go to grad school to gain the hands-on experience I need while also getting an education? Please let me know." This is a question that I think many of us kind of deal with whenever you talk about credentialing, when you talk about proving to someone else that you really do know the things that you are doing. Let me first do a little bit of self-promotion. In the YouTube video description of this video is a link to a video that I did that addresses a lot of the answers that I'm about to give you. It's a video called "How to Get a Job in IT with No Experience," which is, I think, where a lot of people are when they're trying to get their foot in the door. The first thing I'll tell you, it's probably not in the video, but the first thing I'll tell you is take whatever IT job you can get your hands on. Because in the world of IT, You never tend to stay in one position for very long. In the world of IT, very long is a year and a half. You tend to move as you gain knowledge because your skill set becomes more important and more needed as you learn more information. So you might start in a help desk. You might start trying to answer phones or do triage at a network operations center, but eventually you start learning a lot about operating systems. You start learning more about the network. You start learning more about the tools you need to be able to troubleshoot these problems. And you start looking over the shoulder of the people that know a little bit more than you do. This is how I got through the industry as well. If somebody really knew a topic, I wanted to sponge off of them. I wanted to watch what they were doing and ask questions. And why'd you use that command? What does this output show? How did you know that it was this problem? And one of the great things about the people in this industry is they're so open to helping you learn the content. This is something that maybe is not in every industry. I see it in some places here and there, but it's a really important part of IT. None of us know everything. None of us has the ability to know everything because IT is way too broad to know every possible thing. So the way that most people do this is they will focus on a niche. They will focus on a very specific type of technology and become an expert in that specific technology. And when you start becoming an expert, you start becoming more marketable, you start becoming more valuable, and you end up moving to different jobs in different companies, perhaps even making more money or having more flexibility in how you're able to do your job. Those are things that I think are very common in the world of technology. One of the things that Anonymous mentioned, though, and this is sort of a place I think that we are, because this is not unusual in the economy that we're in, is that there's only so many jobs available out there at any particular time. But I think there are, especially as we sit here now in October of 2025, we're struggling with a lot of people who don't have positions in IT. There were a lot of layoffs at the beginning of the year. They were very public layoffs that you saw, but even layoffs that you never heard about, where technical people are no longer working for those companies. So there's more technical people now on the market. So you're having to compete against more people than maybe a different time. As the economy changes, as more projects spin up, and we're starting to see a little bit of movement there, as more projects are starting up, as more things are happening, we've got the holidays coming up, there will be companies needing more help, especially technical help. This might help us on the job front. But it's more than just hands-on experience. There is a need to have knowledge of certifications like we're doing here. One of the other elements I mentioned in that video, how to get a job in IT with no experience, is having a formal education. But how much formal education do you need? Do you need a 2-year AA degree, an Associate of Arts degree? Do you need a 4-year Bachelor of Arts degree or Bachelor of Science degree? Do you need a master's degree, a post-education, post-college, post-university education? Those are important as well. Even a doctorate might even be considered, although I would say that you might want to look at what jobs are posted in your area for IT and see what type of education they're really looking for. I would say probably the vast majority of most employers are looking for somebody with a 4-year degree, sometimes even a 2-year degree. And that is plenty for them. Having a bachelor's degree is probably even over the top for most organizations because a lot of universities, at least in the United States, don't really have a well-formulated IT program. In fact, it's hard to find a university that even has an information technology program. And if they do, it's hard to find an IT program that really is information technology and not just some rebranded version of their computer science program. And for those of you wondering, computer science is not information technology, and information technology is not computer science. Those are two different worlds that do not really connect with each other much, if at all. So that's why I tell people we need to do more than just a 2 or 4-year degree. We need more than just industry certifications. You need to be able to differentiate yourself. And one way that you can differentiate yourself is by doing additional tasks, having a home lab. Tell me about your home lab. Should be a question that many employers will be asking. Tell me about the things that you do with technology. If you've never had a job working in IT, it might be really useful to set up your own Active Directory infrastructure at home. you would run exactly the same Active Directory infrastructure and technologies that the biggest companies in the world are running, but you're running it in your house on your desk. It's the same software. It's the same configuration. It's the same settings. It's the same front end. It's the same administration, but now you're running it in a private, personal environment so that you can become familiar with how do you add a user to the domain? How do you change their password? How do you redirect a login? You know, those are things that you would find in our A+ course, for example. I show demonstrations of those in our A+ course where I step you through step by step. Here's the process you would use to be able to create a login script, to be able to redirect someone's data folder, to be able to change the password. Those are important skills to know. Since we're talking about security, maybe we want to set up a home lab that has a firewall in it, and maybe intrusion prevention or some type of WAF. There are a lot of open source firewalls out there, and that might be a great task to do this weekend. Set up a firewall, put it in place. Maybe don't just run it virtually, but have data passing through it. Use it as a firewall. Part of your goal with doing this is certainly to get more hands-on, to become more familiar with the technology and be able to talk the same language as the people who are doing firewalling or Active Directory or whatever the technology happens to be. But another part of this is that you get stories when you do it. When you go into an interview, I think a lot of people have an expectation that they're just there to answer questions. And they're not really there to run the meeting, if you will. But one of the best things you can do in an interview is to have so many stories about technology that you can take any question that is posed to you and turn it into a 5 to 10 to 15-minute conversation about an experience you had running this particular home lab that you've got. I'll give you an example. So you're in a meeting, you're in this interview, finally, you got the interview. It's either virtual through a Zoom or a web conference, or you're actually in person in front of somebody, and they say, tell us about a problem you ran into and how you solved it. That's an interview 101 type question. You should be ready for that type of question. And there are going to be stories that are really good out of these home labs that you've created. Let's take the firewall one, for example. You've built this firewall, you've plugged it in. To that question, thank you for asking that question. To that question, I have a great experience of troubleshooting that I ran into recently when I implemented the latest version of pfSense or whatever open source firewall you got, where I implemented this and started running my home network through it. And I started to see just how many people on the internet are attacking my network and would have gained access had I not had this firewall in place. And I've created a report that shows all of those incoming attacks, what they were, and how often they occurred. This is something you'll see during the first hour you plug in, the first 5 minutes that you plug into an internet connection, you will be attacked. You will see traffic on that connection. That's the nature of the internet. So why not have a story? You can even say, so I started looking into this and I noticed there was a lot of certain kinds of malware, or there was a lot of certain kinds of attacks, or there was a lot of certain kinds of similar stories, similar in the way that the attacks were coming in from different IP addresses. And I created a report that showed over time the number of attacks. Here's what it looks like. You can even put that up on the screen. Here's the report I created that shows a lot of activity during this time, and then it went up, and then it went down, and it doesn't even seem to care what time of day it happens to be. Then I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see, are these attacks all very different, or is it maybe one style of attack that is really taking over? Let me show you the other report I created that showed what type of attack it was. Notice you're now in control of this conversation. You're now showing people things they've never seen. You're going through a story of what you found, and you start talking about this type of attack was very important to me. I want to be able to block that specific protocol. So I put a rule in my firewall that said, block any incoming Microsoft SQL Server traffic, block any incoming web traffic, block anything from a particular IP address. And here's what those rules look like when I implemented them into the rule base of the firewall. Again, you can show a screenshot, or if you're on a live Zoom, you could show them live on your live firewall. There is a story. And who would not be interested in seeing the information you saw? Because it's something you've never seen before. They've never seen this before. You've now put all of this work into putting this technology in place, and not just using the technology, but really taking advantage of the reporting capabilities and extending your knowledge of that technology. Now, are they using the same firewall software in their company? Probably not. Are they running the same reports in their company? Probably not. But are they using a firewall? They absolutely are. Are they doing reports in their firewall? Oh, yes. They're doing lots of reports on their firewall. So there's a really good example of how you could take one specific project, putting in a firewall, and turn it into a job. Turn that process into the beginnings of your career. This happens all the time. There will be very few people interviewing who have stories like this, and nobody that has the story that you have. So I would recommend you have 2 or 3 stories like that. Line them up, even start telling them to yourself or someone else, practice them, and then have some audio-visual handouts that you could show people. Have some reports, have some configurations, have an explanation of what you found and who you talked to and how you solved this problem. You could even talk about contacting your ISP and seeing if they had ways to protect you even better so that information never got down to your system. So now you're talking about dealing with a third party, dealing with your internet service provider, which, by the way, is something that company does all the time. It's interesting how many skills that we can do in our home lab that have a direct correlation to things that you would do every day in a very large-scale corporate network. Some of the software is different. The scope is certainly different, but the fundamentals are exactly the same. And that's what we're trying to do, is give you the fundamentals so that at that point, you can start telling the stories. Stories become extremely important in an interview. I was reading just as an aside before we go to the next question, I was reading a Reddit post, I want to say it was this week, where someone was talking about having stories during an interview, and the person was responding how important those stories were. And I thought, well, I could have written this. That's exactly right. The next, as Reddit does, the next comment was, well, that's stupid. The person doing the interview should be the one asking the questions and setting the tone. I thought, there's the problem, of course. One of those people is going to get the job. The other person is not. Which one do you think it is going to be? So, Anonymous, thank you for submitting that question. That is a great way to have that conversation started. Maybe that gives you some ideas about what you could do, even without having a job. You don't have to get a master's degree. Take the knowledge that you've gotten with your 2-year or 4-year degree and now just start expanding on it. And by the way, I've worked with many people in this world of IT, many of them that had a 4-year degree. I work with people that have had master's degree. I've worked with people that have had doctorates, and doctorates in things that weren't even technology related. I've also worked with people that had a high school degree, and that was it. But we're incredibly successful in the world of technology because technology is not specifically about the things that you learn at university. Now, if you were going to be a lawyer, that university teaching is incredibly important. If you were going to be a doctor, you definitely need to go through some very strenuous university type study. But for IT, which it falls in this very interesting gray area that somehow sits outside of university, but sort of is starting to blend its way in, you really need to be able to work at many different levels, technologically speaking. So that's my recommendation to you as well. Let's keep going through this list of questions that you have submitted to see what other things that we happen to have here. We got a lot in this list. Thank you for submitting these, by the way. I'm pouring through. Some of you have submitted just comments, which is great as well. Sorry that we won't be stopping on those. We're going to take questions in this section, but I am reading through them, so thank you for submitting them. By the way, if you ever have a question or a comment about anything that we're doing at ProfessorMesser.com, you can always use that Contact Us link that is at the top of our website. that comes directly to me. That's a great way to communicate with me. Or if you are already a member of our site, you've purchased one of our training products before, you can open a help desk ticket from your member login, which is an even better way to get my eyeballs. Those get a little bit higher priority in our list of things. Ultimately, everybody gets an answer, however, of course. Let's go back to your questions. This is another great question. This is about studying. This is about knowing when you're ready to take the exam. This is also from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, I've been studying for my exam for 6 months now. I've attended all your live sessions, watched your YouTube course, practiced many questions, usually scoring around 80 to 85%. However, I still don't feel confident enough to take the exam because my employer is paying for it, and I'd be really disappointed if I failed. How can I tell if I'm truly ready? Well, this is the one that is the question that I often get. Has to be in my top 5 of questions that we often get. This could have been written by me. I'm this person. So I did not write this question. Someone else wrote it, but I'm a 6-month studier as well. As many of you know, on average, the Security Plus exam takes about 2 to 3 months on average for someone new to come in, study everything they need to study, and pass this exam. But I'm not average. I take a long time to study because I like to really dive into every single topic to really understand it. And my study time is very limited. I don't have a lot of time during the day to study. I have a family. I have a business to run. I have questions from you. I have things that are going on. So I might get an hour or 2 at night, maybe, if I'm lucky. So it takes me about 6 months to get through this. Nothing wrong with that. But how do you know if you're ready? Worrying about an exam, I think, is a universal truth. Everybody has anxiety about their exam to some degree. Everybody doesn't know if am I really ready to take the exam or not? I just don't know. So the first thing that I think would give you a very good barometer, that would give you a very good check to see if you really are ready to take the exam, is the exam objectives. These tell you everything about how ready you are. Here's what I mean. So let's go through these objectives. I'm going to skip over the introductory section. Let's go straight to section 1, what they call domain 1, general security concepts. And section 1.1 is compare and contrast various types of security controls. So this is one that I think you will run into. Oh, there we go. Run into, and you can see it has different categories, which are technical, managerial, operational, and physical. There are also control types, which are preventive, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating, and directive. So what you want to immediately do is understand those categories and what each one of those categories stands for, understand the control types and what each one of those control types are. And as you've probably seen from our control types video, there are different controls that you could use across the different categories for each of those control types. So you need to be the one who really understands when somebody says, what is a deterrent control type? Can you answer that? If you can answer that, maybe you mark it in green. If you can kind of answer that, maybe you mark it in yellow. And if you just have no idea what you would tell someone, if somebody said, what is a deterrent control type? Maybe you mark that one as red. So you keep going through that list. You keep trying to figure out, well, keep moving this around. You keep going through that list and trying to figure out and know, do I really know it? And you stick on that section until you really do. That is incredibly important because you could be asked about any one of those control type categories or control types themselves during the exam. You need to know it. Once you have gotten a very good understanding of that section, you go down to section 1.2, summarize fundamental security concepts. Would it be, you need to understand CIA? Nope, not that CIA. The confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's what CIA stands for. This used to be AIC for that very reason. And we got away from that because everybody knows what CIA is, but it's not CIA. It's not confusing at all, is it? We have non-repudiation. We have AAA, which is authentication, authorization, and accounting. Again, not that AAA. We have authenticating people, authenticating systems, and authorization models. Then we have gap analysis, zero trust, all the control plane options, all the data plane options. You have physical security and all those physical security options. And we have deception and disruption technology. That would be a honeypot, a honeynet, a honey file, or a honey token. So if you can explain to yourself or to someone else what all of those bullets are, you can write off that section. Now you've got that section down. Now we go to the next one, section 1.3, and you do the same thing all over again. This is a very involved process, to be sure. This is not a simple process, but this is a very comprehensive study process that should really tell you if you know these topics or not. And if you color code them, you can go right back to the red ones and start cramming on the things that you had no idea about. The green ones you can ignore for the time being because you do understand what those happen to be. And maybe the yellow ones are what you hit next once you're finished all the red ones. So that is a great way. I mentioned a barometer. That is a great barometer to see just how much you remember about the possible topics that could appear on your exam. Now, in this particular case, this person who wrote in, anonymous, wrote in and said they have also practiced questions. Also a great idea. Once you've gone through all the content, once you've read your book, once you've watched all the videos, now let's take some practice questions, maybe even done some hands-on labs. Let's do some practice questions. And if you're getting around 80 to 85%, those are pretty good numbers. Those are great numbers. So you're really in very good shape. So now the anxiety hits. Now this is outside the scope of technology. Now we have to deal with the anxiety of taking this exam. Anytime I take an exam, I'm a bad exam test taker because I have lots of anxiety when I walk into the exam room. In my career, I must have taken over 20 different certification exams of some kind or another, maybe close to 30. And every time I walk into that exam room, my hands are clammy. I'm nervous about the whole thing. I don't want to fail. There's an investment. There's money going into this. I've told people I'm taking the exam. They want to know how I'm going to do on this. They're going to want to know the results of this when I come out of the room. But you don't always pass them. I do not always pass the exams that I take. I try to prepare. I'm much better at preparing these days. But earlier on in my career, I wasn't very good. I didn't have a strategy. I didn't understand what it took to really study for these exams. And I was walking into the exams, maybe studying the wrong thing or studying in the wrong way. So having a very specific strategy around the objectives, the videos, the books, the labs, and ultimately the practice questions is a great way to test yourself, to really solidify the foundational knowledge that you are creating with this exam, and it will make you more confident when you walk into the exam room. I will give you my number one tip for handling the exam anxiety, because my problem with anxiety is it all happens at the beginning of the exam. Maybe this is you too. For those of you that deal with this, you know exactly what I'm saying. You sit down for the exam, you start go. The first question comes up, and the question says, blah, 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 A, B, C, or D. The problem is everything I just read sounded that way in my brain. The question, I didn't really read any of those words. It was just blah, 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 blah. I read the entire question, and then I sat back and thought, I have no idea what I just read. Because the adrenaline is going, you're nervous. It doesn't help you very much when that happens. And it takes you about 5 or 10 minutes to sort of bleed off the anxiety so that you can read the screen. So what I recommend is at the beginning of the exam, there is a document you must agree to. It's called the candidate agreement. There's a copy of this candidate agreement on the CompTIA website. If you type in CompTIA candidate agreement into your favorite search engine, you remember search engines, right? They will take you to the page on the CompTIA website that shows you the same candidate agreement that you have to read through, and it's big. Look at all the stuff you have to read before you're able to take your exam. You have to read all of this. So they give you like 10 or 15 minutes before you start the exam to read through all of this and to click I agree. So you know what normal people do? I mean, normal people who aren't seeing blah, 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 blah on their screen, they scroll to the bottom, they click OK, and they start their exam. That's not what I recommend that myself or you do. I recommend you read through this document, that you start reading it. And maybe it would even be a good idea to read through this document now so you know what it says when you get into the room. Otherwise, when you start reading it, it will say definitions, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't help you either. But having time before the exam might help you. But it's a 10 or 15 minute cool down. It's a timeout. It's a chance for you to technically start the exam. The person has left the room. The proctor has left the room, or the proctor has now started the exam on your side. But now you can take some deep breaths. You might even want to read through some of this just so you have something to read and spend some time. Candidate information shall mean all information related to you collected by CompTIA or any CompTIA agent, including without limitation, registration information. You can just go through the whole thing. Now, when you do that, it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Your timer for the exam has not started yet. This is specifically 10 or 15 minutes that is blocked out prior to the actual start time. Take advantage of this timeout period. Take advantage. It's a cool down. It's a way to get out the anxiety, or at least help get out the anxiety. And you can use that time to now start remembering what English looks like. Start remembering what words and letters put together into a sentence form actually mean. And then when you're done, you can finally click the I agree and actually begin the exam. And now we're in pretty good shape. We're really good shape now because we can understand what we're seeing on the screen. So just another tip or trick that I think might be useful if you're someone like me who just gets so super nervous. You're in the exam and I don't know what it says. The screen, it's a weird environment. There's a funny noise. This mouse is funny. The screen's small. All of that stuff just goes away. Now you can just relax, read through the exam information, and then when you're ready for the first question, you can attack it straight on. Maybe that will help you as well. There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of breathing exercises you might want to think about. You should YouTube some of those. Those are really great for anxiety. Just really relaxing in front of that exam. Those can be super, super useful if you are someone like me who just really has to work through exams that way. And ultimately, I think anything you do is going to help you on that final score. So just think that while you are taking that timeout period, imagine your score going up the moment you do that. That might help you as well. Thank you for submitting that question. That was a very useful one to think about. It reminds me of taking exams. One of the worst exams I ever took, story time, one of the worst exams I ever took, although maybe now it's one of the best exams I ever took. It was as I recall, it was either a Microsoft MCSE exam, or because of the time frame when I took it, I have a feeling it was a CNX certification exam. It's a certified network expert. It's an exam series that doesn't exist anymore, but it tests you on the fundamentals of networking technologies and cabling. There was a cabling CNX, understanding categories of cable, how to properly install cable. Yeah, it was a real exam. I took that one too. Took that one twice. Actually, talking about not passing your exams, did not pass that exam on the first time through. But I took an exam on Ethernet, for example, an Ethernet CNX exam. You really have to know the frame formats. You have to understand the different types of ether types. You really needed to understand implementations of jumbo frames at the protocol levels. It was a fun exam. It was a great exam, but it was very detailed and being able to work through it. So I booked an exam sitting for the CNX. It works just like you do with the CompTIA, the Cisco, the Red Hat, or anything else that you would take, an AWS exam. You schedule the exam at an exam center. You go to the exam center. They sit you down in front of a computer. You take the exam, and we see if you pass or if you fail. Now, at the time, I was working in Miami. I was working near the airport in Miami International, and I was working for an insurance company. And this exam testing center was right around the corner. Well, it turns out it was an exam testing center that was designed for airline certifications, but it was not in the fanciest of places. And if you've ever been down near the Miami airport, you may have some inkling as to what I am saying. And although it was an unusual setup, I think it was on a second floor. You go up some rickety stairs onto the second floor of what looked to be like a strip mall type building. And you walk in, it was a tiny little office. And in the corner was a closet that did not have a door on it. And inside the closet was a desk and a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse. And you sort of sit in a chair on the outside of the closet with no door and work at this desk. That was their testing center. Not kidding. And you could see people were going in and out of the door behind you. It was not closed in. It was interesting. It was an interesting test environment. Now, I want to believe, as I'm thinking back those days, it was a number of years ago, but I believe I passed it. I believe I passed that exam. But it was the oddest exam experience I ever had. That's one of the reasons I'll give you a little insight into my Exam Hacks ebook. I mentioned in that ebook, it might not be a bad idea if you check out the exam center before booking the exam. So if you're reading through that Exam Hacks ebook and you're wonder why he told us to do that, now you know the rest of the story. That's where that came from. So you should know as well. Check out your exam centers. They are all not the same. They are all not built the same. They are all not even close to being identical to each other. So make sure that you know that that's the case. Let's keep going through our list of questions. We have some time left. We can keep going through this view of the world. So here's a good one. This is a question we also often get, but still perfect for the things that we are doing today. Also from my good friend Anonymous. You can submit a question anytime. You do not have to submit your name, and I do not care. This from Anonymous asks, are ports, protocols, and acronyms just pure brute memorization? Assuming no prior IT experience before the exam. In many cases, yes, because you've never had a chance to work with those protocols. You never had a chance to use those protocols. You've never put those protocols into a firewall rule base. You've never been able to see those protocols in use in your Windows firewall or with applications that you've set up. So if you've never touched it before, you're sort of starting from ground zero and you're having to learn that through rote memorization. But one good thing about the Security Plus exam is if you look through the exam objectives, you'll notice no port numbers. For some reason, people are so compelled over wanting to memorize port numbers that they will make up exam objectives and they will start memorizing port numbers for the Security Plus exam. Now, there might be questions on the Security Plus exam that reference ports that might have been in previous exam versions, like Network Plus or A+, but they're not very esoteric. They're usually talking about HTTP, port 80 and port 443, or they're talking about something that is a similar, very common port number that might be in use. But because port numbers are not specifically in the Security Plus exam objectives, you may not want to spend any time studying them, because this turns into one of these scenarios where do you start studying ports? Perhaps more importantly, where do you stop? Do you study 5 ports? Do you study 10? Do you study 100? You have no idea because they're not in the exam objectives. You just have to guess. Well, that doesn't make much sense. Wouldn't it be a better use of your time to study objectives that are specifically, definitively listed in the bulleted official list of things that could appear on your exam? I think it would be. So for Security Plus, ports aren't incredibly important. Protocols are a little more important because there is a section of the exam that talks about what is an insecure protocol and what is a secure protocol. Okay, that is important to know from a security perspective. There may be times when you want to be sure that your terminal session is very secure, or you want to be sure that the web communication is encrypted, or maybe your VPN connection is encrypted. Those would be good protocols to know. So you may have to know those, but it's a limited number if you ever work through those and what it happens to be. We also have acronyms, and there are a lot of acronyms in the exam objectives. Let's go back to these objectives. Let's count, shall we? How many pages of objectives, of acronyms are in these objectives? And it's a dense set. I don't know exactly how many of these acronyms are here, but it's a large number of acronyms that are on that page. So that's page number 1, page number 2, page number 3, page number 4, page number 5, page number 6 and a half. Oh, that's a lot of acronyms. Now, I think people see this, and I think they're compelled in many ways to go to these and start memorizing them, to start sort of flashcarding them, so that SNMP stands for Simple Network Management Protocol, TLS, Transport Layer Security, VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, and they're sort of doing that. But as we've already seen, I gave you an example of this today, they don't tend to ask you that information on the exam. You're probably not going to get a question on your exam. Be very unlikely to get one that says, what does VDI stand for? You're not going to get one of those. But there might be a question on your exam that talks about a security administrator is implementing VDI on their corporate network. What types of things, blah, blah, blah. They might allude to that technology, expecting that you understand not only that VDI means virtual desktop infrastructure, but also how you would use that technology on your network. How would you implement that technology for people to use it? So certainly, if you are someone who is working through the details of this, make sure you are familiar with at least the ones that are in your exam objectives. And I think you would be better off going through the exam objective sections and learning the acronyms there kind of organically, rather than learning them as flashcard pieces. Here's what I mean. For example, we saw this already in section 1.2, where confidentiality, integrity, and availability is an important security concept. And we refer to that concept as CIA because that is the first letter of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So already in section 1.2, you've learned your first acronym. In fact, you've learned your second acronym because you have authentication, authorization, and accounting, a term we never say that way in the industry. We always say, is the AAA server working? Because that's AAA, that's AAA. So you will start learning these acronyms just as part of your normal learning process as you go through the objectives. So learn them here first. And I would say that the acronym list that's in the back of this page, it's almost too much. There are things in here that really should not apply. For example, there is IRC, Internet Relay Chat. You know, there is a security hook there. IRC is often used for many different malware implementations for that malware to interact and communicate to each other. But we don't tend to see that acronym pop up as part of the normal objectives. So I don't know that it's incredibly necessary that you learn every single acronym that's in this list. But I think it might be useful from a broader perspective, once you're done with this exam, to have some familiarity with those and how they are worked into the world of IT security. So hopefully that gives you some perspective over what you need to know or what you don't need to know, or how you study for this exam. Because I think there is more of a direction, at least most recently with these exams, to get away from pure rote brute force memorization and process this more into a usability implementation perspective. And we're starting to see that. In fact, the latest exam that was updated by CompTIA was released in March. It was their newest A+ exam. A lot of the stuff that was rote memorization in previous versions of the exam were completely removed from the current version. I think they just saw that there's just too much to know. And so we may see that with the next Security Plus version that comes out, in a year plus, year and a few months, year and more than that. You may see that there is more of a focus on how to apply technology rather than how to memorize technology, which I think everybody would want. I think that would be a good way to go about doing this. So hopefully that's giving you some insight into the process. But if you've never touched these before, yeah, you do have to remember it. You do have to know it. And maybe flashcards would be a good idea for something like that. More questions. Let's see what you've submitted. Of course, you can submit your questions at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your question. This is one that applies sort of across the board. It is not really specific to exam objectives. It's sort of outside the scope of objectives, but still incredibly important when you're trying to get that first job in IT or trying to get a job in something that may be security related. This is from Rich. Rich says, how crucial is learning/understanding Python and Linux in the average day-to-day for someone in security? This is a skill set that I think a lot of people dismiss or perhaps don't know about. Because in the world of IT, not just security, but in the world of IT, automation is incredibly important. There is so much automation that we do every day in information technology. I have tons of automation that's on the Professor Messer website. Every day, every hour, every minute, there is some script or another that is running that processes certain things that I need to have done during the business day. Really outside the business day as well, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we use some type of automation in almost everything we do in technology. Whether you are administrator of a laptop or desktop system, maybe you're a network administrator, maybe you're in the security role, maybe you're doing databases, maybe you're in charge of data centers, maybe there's certain applications that you're an expert in, you're using automation all the time. If you're in a Windows environment, it is incredibly important that you become familiar with PowerShell. PowerShell is the Microsoft Windows operating system scripting and automation language. It is able to access practically any part of the Windows operating system, and many employers will look to see that you have a skill set in understanding and using PowerShell. The other type of automation that is probably right up there, side by side with it, is Python. Python is an incredibly useful, and it is used across multiple operating systems, and it really became very popular in the way that it was able to orchestrate cloud-based services. And we realized, well, if we can do cloud-based services with Python, we can do anything with Python, and it works very well to be able to do that. So having a very expertise knowledge in Python and having expertise in PowerShell are two very, very valuable skills. And they are able to really differentiate you when you walk into an interview, when you hand in your resume, when you're trying to get that first job in IT. Incredibly useful to be able to automate these things that would normally you would manually have to type in. And so if you are in a position where you are needing to explain to someone how you would fit better into this role than someone else, pull out your PowerShell skills. Talk about the way that you manage PowerShell. Talk about your Python scripts that you run. Talk about all the things that you do from an automation perspective. So those are really differentiators. You're looking for some skills that will make you stand apart from everybody else in the industry. These certainly will. These are not the only automation that you will ever do. You need to be familiar with batch files and shell scripts. You need to be able to maybe do a little bit of Perl, maybe do a little bit of other interpreted languages and other scripting languages. Those can be very useful. But one of the benefits is once you learn the fundamentals of scripting and automating, you can apply those fundamentals across a number of different languages. The syntax is a little bit different, but the logic is the same. So you want to really work on understanding the logic and how you can implement that into the normal day-to-day automation of the things that you do. From a security perspective, Python is incredibly important. PowerShell is incredibly important. If somebody comes up to you and says, for example, I've got a concern about an SMB vulnerability. How many systems on our network are configured to use SMB version 1? That was a very popular scan that people did a number of years ago. Well, that's perfect for PowerShell. You could have PowerShell run either during login, or you could force a PowerShell to run on somebody's workstation, and it will check the Windows operating system and report back the findings. And you'd be able to create a database showing everybody on the network is safe, or there are certain machines that we need to change. it's a very, very powerful security tool because you don't want to have to go to everybody's individual computer. Excuse me, one side. Let me look at your registry. We'll work with it. Those are things we'd never want to run into and do manually. We could just do it automatically and being able to work through this. Find the automation that you do that works the best for the things that you would like to do. And I think that would be a great place to start with your day-to-day. And it would position you very well, not just for workstation administration, server administration, network administration, but absolutely in the world of IT security. We use automation all the time, and you need to be as familiar as you can be with that. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's see if we can squeeze in one more, right? Let's see if we can get another question in of the things that you have. If I can find it, I will be glad to present one to you. Let's keep going on this list. Let's keep going down this list. A lot of great questions here. I'm sorry, I'm having to skip over a number of them because you have worked through this list. Well, I mentioned this one. There were a number of questions that came in because a number of people are getting computer science education, or they find computer science classes to take, and they're wondering, why are those computer science classes not recognized in the world of IT? Well, it's because it's computer science. That's why. Computer science is really focused on creating applications, building hardware, building the firmware that runs the hardware, building the software that works with the firmware that runs the hardware. It's kind of the research and development of our software and our hardware is the computer science side of things. If you're wanting to build applications, if you want to be a programmer, an application developer, if you want to build your own mobile apps, that's computer science. Now, if you want to build a data center, if you want to install and maintain operating systems, you want to improve the efficiency of your network, if you want to secure the data that's on your network, if you want to implement large-scale connectivity across multiple locations with encryption, if you want to make sure that you've got a secure authentication process and that your data is secure, that's information technology. And those two sides really do not connect to each other. There was a push a number of years ago to take developers and turn them into operations people. And as many of us who have been in operations for a long time know, that's an awful idea. Not because they aren't capable of doing it, but because they haven't done it before. If you're in a mode of programming and creating applications, you really are not super concerned about the change control process. You implement the change, you push out the patch, and there it goes into production. There's a whole set of processes behind the scenes of understanding operating systems, managing networks, understanding the security aspects, connecting all of those together and keeping them running. And it takes one person an entire career to become an expert in that, just as it takes one person an entire career to be an expert in application development. You can't really combine those two worlds and expect to be any good at application development or any good at doing the information technology because you're not doing any of them as a full-time job. So that's why I think that's, and rightly so, that people who've spent a lot of time with computer science are not finding a lot of connection to the world of IT because there really isn't any. There really is not a piece of that. There's maybe a little overlap right in the middle. Somebody has to hand over the software that we then install on our systems, for example. So that is exactly where that fits. So things like IT security, if you're doing penetration testing, if you're maintaining a firewall, if you're setting up a SIM, if you're building out authentication, those are all information technology tasks. Computer science application developers not doing that. That's not developing an application. That's not building hardware. That's all on the IT side. So that's why I often am confused over the university emphasis in computer science and at the same time a seemingly lack of emphasis in information technology. That just doesn't make sense to me. But it's sort of the history of universities lends itself to be more of a, as they like to say, a place of learning, not a place of training. Just a horrible way to look at the world, but There you go. That's our education system in a nutshell. That's why they don't really talk a lot about IT. They see it as more of something, yeah, you can just get training on it and then you can do it. What do you need a university for after all? They are starting to see the error of their ways. We're starting to see more and more universities really implement not just an information technology program, but a well-established, well-thought-out information technology program. I hope we see more of those in the future. It would be great. I think we need some of that in our industry. Until then, I'll keep doing this. Until then, I will keep making certification videos. As long as you keep watching them, I will have something that will allow us to get through those barriers, to get over those interviews, to get that first job or your next job in IT and continue to move up through the ranks. It's a great place to be. I would not be promoting it and doing it if it's not something I had not gone through myself. There's huge value there. And I think it's one that I love telling people about because I know that once you grab on to understanding the things you can do in IT, you can go anywhere and do anything. I was able to travel the world to talk to people anywhere to implement and work on some of the biggest networks in the world, to work with cybersecurity systems that were up until that time something that the world had never seen before. I would have never had those opportunities had I not gotten into the world of information technology. It's something that if I can do it, you can absolutely do it. And this is the way we do it, is we learn from the bottom up. We start building our foundation of knowledge. We start adding to it and adding to it. And before you know it, you've now become an expert in that particular technology. Well, I think that is a great place to finish up with our study group today. I want to thank everyone for joining us in that first hour with the questions you had and the answers to the things that I had posed to you. Perhaps I think even more fun is kind of the after show, where we get to see what questions you have and really dive into the specifics of the way this industry works and the things that you should be thinking about as you plan your strategy for getting that job or that next job in IT. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Don't forget, we do one of these every month. Be sure to check the calendar to know when the next one is going to be at professormesser.com/calendar. We'll see you in November for our next study group. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.